Thanks for listening to our podcast Unmetered. As a member-owned, not-for-profit electric cooperative, our focus is on providing affordable, reliable, safe electricity and outstanding member service. One way that we're doing that is by providing more avenues of communication to you, our member. Through the podcast, we hope that you will be able to find some helpful hints, tips, and things to help you conserve energy, as well as some informational pieces that will help you understand what it means to be a member. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Unmetered, brought to you by Middle Tennessee Electric, your member-owned, not-for-profit electric cooperative. We're back in studio again with Josh. Is of course, if you missed him last week, we had one of our first Unmetered bonus stories.
Yeah, it was actually, I got to listen to it, which was kind of cool. It was a really good story, and so timely. I mean, it's almost like you planned that out.
What? Yes, we did actually it was actually planned. So if you've got a question about your HVAC unit, be sure to check out last week's story, because there's a fantastic little story that we created about, well, I'm not going to tell you, because if you haven't listened to it, the point is to guess what that story is about. But we will say that it has to do with your HVAC system. So check it out. You can also hear some other energy efficiency tips if you go to our last full podcast, and you'll be able to hear some information about how to save some energy and save a little bit of money on your monthly bill. You know,
I'm really digging this new format. You know, I like the story idea. It's a little bit different. I know that there's a lot of podcasts out there that's what people talk about, and I think it's great. I mean, really, it's informative, it's interesting. So I like what you did last week. That was good.
Yeah, well, eventually, like I said, we'll be shaking it up. Sometimes it'll be me, sometimes it'll be Josh as we create these stories.
No,
surprise. No, we're looking forward to that. There's a lot of good stories that are going to be coming out this year.
Yeah.
As we prepare for the 2018 years, you've already been seeing in the Tennessee Magazine a little bit of an experience membership type.
It's going to be cool
stuff. It's going to be. We're really looking forward to it. But that's not what we're talking about today.
No,
instead we're actually talking.
And maybe that's why I'm not on here as often as we digress very quickly.
But we're actually talking today about the record-breaking,
man, January was crazy.
Record-breaking energy consumption that Middle Tennessee Electric members were a part of last month.
Yeah, so you know, a lot of our members, I would say the vast majority of our members, you know, are starting to get their bills, and they're high. I mean, they're high. My bill was high. My bill was double,
right?
Thereabouts, and you know, so they're higher than normal. And you know, we had a prolonged period of cold in January, and you know, your HVAC unit was just running. We've talked about it. You know, the heat pumps that most HVAC units in the area that they have are fantastic 10 months out of the year. And then 2 months, or even the real cold months, they're not the most efficient things in the world. So in January, you know, we had these prolonged periods of cold, and what that did is it actually set a record for Middle Tennessee Electric. The amount of energy consumed shattered any record that we've had in 82 years.
That's one, we've talked about TVA breaking records.
Right.
You know, they had, 706 million megawatts used. And Middle Tennessee Electric helped contribute to that record.
That's right. Well, you know, in 2014, we set a record with the polar vortex. And you know, at that time, Middle Tennessee Electric members, we consumed, and I say we because we're both members, we consumed 563,000 megawatt hours during 2014. This January, we crushed that by almost 100,000. We as members consumed 639,000 megawatt hours throughout. I think it was from the 1st to the 20th. But here's the great thing, or I should say the interesting thing: we actually set a peak. We actually had peak demand twice. And almost the exact same thing.
Now explain what is peak demand before you tell us how large of a peak we set.
Sure.
What is peak demand?
So what it does is at a certain time when we were looking at the data, it showed that, I believe it was at 8:00 in the morning on 2 separate days, we had the demand from the system, the request for power from our members to the system reached its highest and then started to fall off. So on January 2nd and January 18th. So we're talking 16 days, two weeks apart. We hit the same peak, which was 1,478 megawatts of power. So at some point during that day, we hit that peak, and then it started to trail off.
Right. So with peak demand, I mean, I guess you could kind of view it as top speed. The fastest your car could go at a single point is its top speed. Well, in our terms, peak demand is the most we've ever had come through the system or that has been requested by members.
That's right.
On our system.
On that particular day at that time, at 8, and I want to say it was like 8:00 in the morning. We hit our peak demand. When we looked at it, that's when we requested the most.
Well, and that makes sense because you're talking about peak demand, 8:00 in the morning.
Yep.
Now you refer to a polar vortex, and yes, I'm a member now, but I was not a member in 2014. In fact, I was living on a different system, but I remember how cold it was because I was trying to drive. I had just started a new job in Cookeville, and so I was actually trying to drive from here to there because I hadn't yet found a place to live up there. And so I remember how cold it was because it took me almost 3 hours to drive from here to Lebanon. And so it was cold. It was icy.
Yeah.
A polar vortex. Again, I don't even know what those words mean, but it sounds bad.
It sounds really bad.
And we beat that.
Yeah.
With how cold it's been, how long it's been. That was the other kicker.
Well, and the 639,000 megawatt hours that we drew, that was over the course of the month. But on those 2 days, the amount that we pulled set records. So the overall record, the 82-year record, or the most draw in our history, is 639,000 megawatts so that's over the course of the month.
Right.
But those 2 days were the highest peak days that we experienced, and so when members are starting to see their bill, it's not because of anything that Middle Tennessee Electric did. It's just truly because it was so cold for such a long time. Your heating and air conditioning units or your heating unit just never shut off. Mine didn't.
Well, and oftentimes it couldn't catch up. So so the way HVAC units in our area work is they've got a heat pump inside that pulls heat from the air and warms it up. However, at a certain point, when your heat pump is no longer able to keep up with the demand that you're asking inside the house. So say, for instance, you want it set at a very comfortable but slightly chilly 68 degrees.
Right.
If the outside temperature is below 20 degrees or at some points during January is below 10 degrees, it's not able to keep up with that demand. And so what ends up happening is it starts using direct electricity to try to catch up and keep you warm.
Yeah. And so that when you hear or you see your thermostat kick into auxiliary or emergency heat, pretty much the same thing. What it's doing is the best description that I've heard was when we were doing an interview with Channel 2. The weatherman, he actually said, when your auxiliary or emergency heat kicks in, it's like taking a fan and blowing it over toaster coils. When you push a little toaster down, you see those. That's exactly what it's like. So when auxiliary or emergency heat kicks in, it's using on average about 3 times the amount of energy that you normally would. So you got to figure if you're at 68 degrees and your thermostat's on or your unit's on and off, and it's not really drawing a ton. The second that auxiliary heat kicks in, man, you're pulling 3 times the amount of energy, and it's warming you up, but it's almost you can almost just hear the ching ching ching, because that's just what it's doing.
Well, and again, it's one of those things where a lot of times we don't realize how cold it was, because when we were awake, we were wearing extra layers of clothes. We were outside in the sunshine some days, but at nighttime, there's none of that. And so it's like you said, it's just constantly running in the background without us realizing it. But when we think megawatts, that's a lot of watts.
That is a huge, and we know that I'm not good at math. I'm not going to even pretend to try to, not even a little bit.
Pull the math out on it.
No.
But but one thing what we do know is that typically your house's consumption is measured in kilowatt hours.
Right.
So when you talk about megawatts, and again, not a math guy, but I do know that the metric system works in multiples of 10. So again, not sure how many 10s that is, but again, that's a huge amount of power being drawn. And again, you're talking 220,000 members and meters and things across our service territory, all pulling energy at the same time, all doing a lot of the same things. That's hot water heaters. That is all things else, all sorts of other issues there. But on average, how much?
So that's kind of interesting. So in 2016, we went out and looked at some data, and so we found that in 2016, the average residential consumption is 1,345 kilowatt hours.
Right.
For us, that puts an average member's bill, between $140, $150 thereabouts.
Sure.
Just roughly. During January, when we hit these peaks, the average member consumption, as an average residential consumption, was 2,115 kilowatt hours. So looking at and just doing real simple, real quick math, if you took that,
there is math involved here. You did have the math ready here.
I knew it, but it's not megawatt math.
Okay.
If you took that amount and just looked at our residential rates and added the basic service charge, it ends up making the average residential bill about $200.
Right.
And that's just for an average user. That's which most folks probably used a little bit more than that. I know I did. So when you start to look at those numbers and see that the average kilowatt hour usage jumped considerably, it makes the average bill jump considerably.
Well, and the thing about this, the other piece to this as well is, like you said, this being an average concept. So I mean, there's some on the far end.
Oh yeah.
And again, this is residential. This isn't even talking about commercial or businesses or anything of that nature. This is purely, we're talking about residential usage. Right. But again, the last data from that we had from 2016 that we were given was 1,300, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. And what we did is we went out to the EIA.gov site, and we were able to find some comparable data from other states. We have data for us. We have the most up to date data. Up to today. I mean, this very minute we're pulling that data. We have that data accessible. But the EIA.gov site only had their data up to 16. So what we wanted to do is, in order to compare apples to apples, we actually pulled similar rates. And because we were actually behind or right around, let me see, I believe it was, we're right behind Louisiana, but for the 2016 information, right behind Louisiana as far as per capita residential
average residential household there. And from what I'm seeing here on my notes here is that Louisiana, they averaged somewhere around 1,200. Right. We averaged literally about 2 kilowatts less than them on average. And that's
Tennessee as the state. Now, breaking that down to Middle Tennessee
going
electric
even further.
Members, right. To us, it's actually a little bit more than the state average. But one of the things that we have going for us as Middle Tennessee Electric, as member owned and not for profit, is our rates are low. Yeah. Our rates are 20% lower than the national average. So when you look at that, and we've had folks say, "Oh, well, my bill's high, you adjusted your rates." That's not the case. Right. I mean, truly, it's not. We don't line the pockets of people. We're not looking to jack up rates or price gouge or anything like that. We bill truly on what you have used. Now, to take that even one step further, we are actually billed on what we sell. So TVA says, "Hey, you guys used 639,000 megawatts, here's a bill." Right. And then we have to take and pay them. So for every dollar that comes in from the members, 82 cents of every dollar goes to TVA. Right. And we have 18 cents to basically operate the cooperative, to keep the lights on and do all the things that we do as a cooperative. So we don't make a ton of money on that because we're paying it to TVA. Right. So we're truly charging on what is there are some places, and I'm not saying some utilities, but there's some companies, and you can read about them in the news that do that when there's hard times to price gouge. It doesn't benefit us to do that. We're not going to do that.
Not at all. And again, you're talking about we pay TVA for this power, and our rates are 20% lower than the national average. But the on the flip side of that, we have low rates, but we still have high bills because our particular membership in part, as you mentioned earlier, the state average is somewhere around 1,240 kilowatt hours. But that is actually not what our members do. Our members are more in the 1,300 range, which actually puts us at one of the highest consumption in the country.
And that's where, regardless of low rates, if you have high consumption, your bills will naturally be higher. It doesn't matter what way you cut it. I mean, if you consume more, your bill will be higher. I mean, it is the cooperative business model is so awesome in the sense that we are not for profit. We're not saying, hey, we get charged by TVA. It's not like there's not a markup. No, exactly.
It's not like in business. At one point I worked at a retail store, and everything had a 50 or 60% markup, and so then we'd throw coupons or we'd throw discounts or something that would bring that down. The cooperative doesn't operate that way.
We don't. We don't have that markup. Our rates are low, and we keep them low because we want our members to not have to pay an exorbitant amount for energy. We know it's something they need, and so we keep our rates low, and we want to continue to do that. So really, when we say we're just billing you with what you used, that's it. I mean, it's that simple.
And earlier last week, we our president and CEO Chris Jones put out a video on social media, and we had a phenomenal response by the membership. It was very, very good to see the number of members that are involved, that are engaged with this cooperative. And we had the ability to go out and talk to, to interact with some of them and ask, they had questions and concerns. And that just kind of brings to the fact that the cooperative wants to help the members. So if you've got a question or a problem, contact us either on social media or through the contact center or anything.
Huge. That is so huge because the last thing that we want to do, and I mean this, and I know that Chris and our leadership would say the same thing. The last thing that we want to do is cut somebody's power off. We want to help in as many ways as we can. If we have the ability to help you, we want to help you. We don't want to cut your power. So, if you find yourself on the receiving end of one of those high bills, and you're like, man, what do I do? Call us. Call us.
And again, that number you can call is 877-777-9020. You can also reach out to us, as I mentioned earlier, on social media.
Stop by one of our offices.
We've got 7 of them.
That's right.
We've grown over 82 years to have 7 offices. I was actually doing some history on our cooperative as a whole, and
that could be a podcast story.
I wonder what's coming soon. But again, reach out and talk to us. We're your neighbors. We want, we're your friends. We live and work in this community, and we want to help those that we serve.
That's right. And if you don't reach out to us, we can't help. I mean, truly, that's really what it is.
Well, again, we are so thankful that you decided to spend a few minutes with us and listen into this week's podcast. Again, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, be sure to do that.
That's right.
We're on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. You can also find us on YouTube, Facebook. And
we are a lot of places.
And
all over everything.
They might get tired of seeing our faces, but
just listen to us then.
That exactly, through the podcast. That's fantastic. Well, thanks again for listening. If you've not done so, be sure to check out sharingchange.org. And of course, if you experience an outage, be sure to give us a call at 877-777-9111, or you can download our mobile app at MyMTEMC, again on iTunes and Google Play.
That's right.
Thanks for listening.
See you. Unmetered is brought to you by Middle Tennessee Electric.